Thank you for being out here this afternoon with all of us. This is the second fall virtual author, speaker, and workshop series event on anti-racist community engagement principles and practices. So over the course of the fall and the spring, we authors and editors would like to share insights from you on our recently published book, Anti-Racist Community Engagement Principles and Practices. The first session, which was held last week, focused on the first principle, which was reframing institutional and pedagogical practices. So today, and for our upcoming workshop, which will be the next in the series, we're going to focus on the second principle of the book, which is critical reflections on individual and systemic structural racism, understanding positionality, bias, and the historic roots of systemic racism. And in the spring, we'll focus on principles 3 and 4, which highlight learning and course design and creating a compassionate and reflective classroom. So in each of our speaker or workshop events, we hope to use a shared language of the principles to showcase examples and demonstrate how chapter authors are putting their anti-racist values into practice by making distinct choices to confront and dismantle whiteness within institutional structures and in our community campus collaborations. So with that, allow me to do some introductions and provide a bit more of an overview on the book and its purpose. So my name is Joseph Krupczynski. I had the privilege of working with an incredible editorial team orchestrated by our lead editor and project manager of the book, Christina Santana. And I'm a professor in the Department of Architecture and the Director of Civic Engagement and Service Learning at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. And I co-edited the section on Principle 2 with my co-facilitator today and great friend, Elaine Ward, who is the associate professor, who is an associate professor and chair of the Higher Education Department at the Winston School of Education and Social Policy at Merrimack College. Okay, so before we start our program today, I just want to provide a quick overview of the book for those who may not be familiar with it, and then Elaine.
Can we pass back to Nicole to see before we get into it, if she needs to tell us anything from Campus Compact?
Let's pass it on to Nicole.
Thank you. This will be very quick. Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to be a part of this great event and to just welcome you to what we are sure will be a really great experience for everyone. My name is Nicole Springer. I am the Chief Equity Officer and Senior Director of Professional Development and Scholarship for Campus Compact. Campus Compact has long been committed to issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in our work. And over the years, it's taken on a variety of different forms, from our Newman Civic Engagement Fellows to our Engaged Scholars Initiative, to supporting the authors and editors of this tremendous book, which I've been able to be a part of for the last year of its coming into fruition. There are just a couple of things that I want to make sure that people know about before we get started, so you know a little bit about what's coming up from Campus Compact around these issues. So last year, Dr. Kestel Sweet served as our Strategy and Visioning Fellow and spent part of her time with us investigating the strategic integration of diversity, equity, and inclusion and community and civic engagement functions on campuses. Her report will be published in the next couple of weeks, with the opportunity to then register for a virtual institute that will be held December 12th that will dig deeper into her findings. And then we'll ask folks to participate in a design thinking workshop to further our knowledge on this and hopefully get more information out to you all. And then this year, we have Dr. Lisa Schwander, who is serving as our Intercultural Development Fellow. And we are working together to better understand the current landscape of intercultural development connected to campuses, community, and civic engagement efforts. So please look for a survey that's going to come out in early December, so we can learn more from you about what's happening on your campuses. And what's great about her fellowship is that she is also assisting us as we work to incorporate an intentional intercultural development as both an internal function of Campus Compact and a strategic way to offer things to the network to help build your own ability to do that work on your campuses. And so we're excited to have these things happen in conjunction with and continuing the work that we have been doing for a long time, and also to sort of help uplift this work on anti-racism. One final note before we get to the main event. I just want to share with you all that you will be getting resources today from our speakers, and we will be sharing them with you in an email that will come out next week. And then that will also be posted on our website with the video and other information that you have. The final thing, because I know that this is important, is for folks who do not have the book, I will be sharing a link very shortly that will take you to the main landing page for this book and for the digital companion. And if you follow the link on that page, you will be sent to a place where you will get 20% off your purchase of the book. And so if you haven't gotten it yet, now is a good time to do that. And so I'm going to hand it back over to Dr. Krupczynski to continue on and let folks start having their conversations with you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm sorry I just, kind of jumped in there and I totally forgot about your introduction that you were going to do. So I'm so glad that you got to do that and share all those amazing resources and things that are happening through Campus Compact. So getting back to the general introduction here, I just wanted to say a little bit about the overview of the book for folks who may not be that familiar with it, and then my colleague Elaine will go over Principle 2 in a more detailed fashion. So it's important to know that the book is really an accumulation of years of work and dialogue from colleagues committed to anti-racist community engaged actions regionally and across the country. So over the last 4 years, the 8 co-editors prepared grants, developed curriculum and programs, wrote policies and protocols, and founded a regional consortium, all to move campuses towards a more equitable community engagement and fuller recognition of faculty, students, communities of color, and indigenous communities doing anti-racist community engaged work. So this included the development of the anti-racist community engagement principles that became the basis of the book. So that project was focused on better understanding and aligning the needs of students and community partners. So it took place over a period of 7 months and included teams at 4 campuses across the state of Massachusetts, piles of literature on anti-racist teaching, learning, and research, as much data as we can get to understand how individual institutions understood and responded to the experiences and needs of minoritized students, and focus groups with students and community partners at each of our campuses. So the effects of all this work was a series of statements organized into 4 parts or principles that comprehensively capture and define what anti-racist community engagement looks like when voices of students and community partners are centered. So these 4 principles form the structure of the book, and the book is in 4 parts, and each of the series of chapters focus on one of the parts, one of the principles. So the purpose of the book is to build on the wisdom of the principles revealed by the groundswell of work already underway to prioritize anti-racist values in the pivot away from the traditional higher education centric and white savior ways of doing community engaged teaching, research, and practice. And overall, the chapters demonstrate how the authors implement one or more anti-racist principles in their own work. And at no more than 2,500 pages, 2,500 words per chapter, the 22 chapters are aimed at ensuring a wide variety of stakeholders that can gain insights in a concise format. The chapters are structured by first outlining a case, then the practice, and then authors use to address the case issues, and finally connections, how their work connects to a broader context of pedagogy, curricular, and institutional and community change. So the 4 sections of the book are aligned with the 4 principles of anti-racist community engagement, and they demonstrate efforts taken at, and just very briefly, the level of the institution, which is kind of principle 1, to the intrapersonal through critical reflection, which is our focus today, and 3, through intentional learning and course design, and 4, through cultivating compassionate and reflective classrooms. So with that kind of brief introduction, I'll pass it along to Elaine to tell us more about Principle 2 before we hear from our speakers today.
Thank you so much, Joseph. And if you can go ahead and share that slide, that would be wonderful. I really appreciate it. Joseph and I started working closely together when we were editing the principles themselves. So very early on in this work, and it's been a real honor to get to work closely with Joseph throughout the entire book project. The anti-racist community engagement principle 2 is focused on critical reflection on individual and systemic structural racism. And it calls on us to not only understand our own positionality and bias, but also to more fully acknowledge and understand the historic roots of systemic racism, white supremacy, and colonial oppression. We individually and collectively are called to engage in and commit to critical reflection on why and where systemic and structural racism shows up, and how racism impacts and hinders our community engagement efforts. U.S. higher education has been founded upon and perpetuates elitist, patriarchal, colonial, and racist policies and practices. Consequently, higher education community engaged work has the same roots. The contributors in this section of the book call on us to acknowledge this history with openness, honesty, and humility as we reject the status quo and reclaim an authentically anti-racist commitment to community engagement. And such an approach seeks to reorient power and knowledge production within the communities themselves and is truly justice-oriented. So you can see from the slide that's in front of you that there are 5 components to Principle 2 that can help us think through and reflect upon these, structures of systemic racism. Principle 2.1 encourages us to raise student and faculty critical consciousness about white supremacy and racism before and during community engagement. And that's what you'll see in these chapters in this section, is how faculty and staff have thought through and reflected upon the practices about power and privilege, questioning bias and false histories or narratives that justify or legitimize the status quo, in order to build the critical understanding of oppression and political efficacy to challenge power and enact systemic change. And that's what we're really thrilled that the chapters help really highlight on some of these principles in more detail. 2.2 asks us to critically consider the forms of racism and white privilege that are taking place in higher education, their impact on knowledge production, and how normative epistemologies affect how we perceive and know the world. And then we go on in Principle 2 to think about how we engage in dialogue with community partners to understand their own histories and issues, to better support their work and build their capacity to access campus knowledge and resources. And we're thrilled that Valandra will be here with us today to share some of those perspectives. The principle then goes on and asks us and challenges us to recognize, reflect on, and work toward addressing challenges that minoritized students face on our campus, alongside working on issues they care about within their community. So it's important that we center our students. And finally, Principle 2.5 acknowledges the intersectionality that's important to students and faculty understandings of racial inequality and inequity, while maintaining a primary focus on anti-racist goals. And so there are a number of chapters in this section that will go through the structure that Joseph talked about. And with Valandra's presentation today, we'll have an opportunity to really have dialogue and discussion about how you can see Principle 2 in your own work and how you want to live it and enact it in your own spaces and places. And Joseph, I'm going to hand it back over to you now.
Thank you, Elaine. So I'm going to start by introducing our first speaker, which I also have to unfortunately tell you that she was unable to make it here today, Jessica Coleman, but just sent us an audio file that a kind of short summary of what she was going to present today, and I'm going to be playing that in just a moment. But just to give you a short bio of Jessica and talk a little bit about her chapter. So Jessica Coleman is a licensed certified social worker, received her MSW at the University of Minnesota in 2016, where she's currently pursuing a PhD in social work and works as a research assistant. Working with youth and adults within the community served as a catalyst for her research focus on child welfare systemic oppression. So Jessica and her co-author, Priscilla Gibson, wrote chapter 12 of the book, which is entitled Intergenerational Strategies for Dealing with Racism. And in their chapter, they share their anti-racist community-engaged research practice that has grown from a deeply personal encounters with racism. And their partnership with African-American women elders evidences the importance of being guided by and learning from lived experience of these women as they reflect on and give voice to their own experience with racism, so they might work to dismantle the impact of systemic racism in their community, especially for African-American youth. That is the focus of the chapter. So I am going to just share.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Coleman, and I am a social work PhD student. Today, I would like to talk a little bit about intergenerational academic mentoring and how it has had a positive impact on my development as a PhD student and as a researcher. As an African American woman, I have had many experiences dealing with racism and scrutiny on different levels and in different situations. Coming to a predominantly white institution and being in a PhD program for the first time, where I did not have connections to individuals who had also experienced being in a PhD program and couldn't really talk to how I would navigate specific situations, made it challenging initially to know how to engage in certain conversations. And so the mentorship that I received was essential in helping me to strategize on like what to share and how to present it. Especially when the tools that I chose to use or to talk about when elevating the experiences and voices of Black people, such as critical race theory, was scrutinized. And so having that mentorship really helped me learn how to have difficult conversations and to have healthy dialogue in a way that allowed me to get my point across and be able to share the research and the experiences that I had doing the research with my peers and professors. With that being said, I'd also like to say that the intergenerational academic mentoring that I received really helped me utilize the wisdom and knowledge that has been garnered by my mentor over the years, as it relates to academia and research, to help me avoid certain challenges that if I did not have that guidance, I wouldn't really, I would be blindsided to, and wouldn't even know existed. And so for me, I felt like, and I currently feel like it's so essential to have those connections so that individuals stay engaged, and are able to continue the hard work of anti-racist, community engaged research. And it's also very important that individuals who look like the community are able to do the research. And in order to do that, um, you have to have connection. And so for me, that connection really was the mentorship that I have received and continue to receive. Okay, thank you, everyone. I hope that this was helpful. If you have any questions, I'm not sure if they're sharing my email, but I am more than willing to answer questions via email. Okay, thank you. Bye.
So I want to really thank Jess for making making the time to make that video and contribute as best she could to today's conversation. So a couple things that I'll just say in terms of if you have any questions as the presentation goes, like on Jessica's presentation now, but we're going to move on to our next speaker. And as Valandra is speaking, if there's anything that comes up for you, please put it in the Q&A. And after the presentations, we hope to have a kind of a robust conversation. Okay, so our next speaker. So I'm really very happy to present Valandra. And Valandra is an associate professor in the School of Social Work with a joint appointment in the African and African American Studies program at the University of Arkansas. Her scholarship focuses on community engaged research with African American families and intergenerational resilience, interpersonal violence, and intersectional racism. So Valandra and her co-authors, Roanne Elliott and LaShonda Fields, wrote chapter 11 in the book, which is entitled Washington County Community Remembrance Memorial Marker, Practicing Anti-Racist Community Engagement. And in their chapter, they present very poignant examples of a trauma caused by through racist lynchings and violent murders, and a community's efforts to come together across racial lines in a collaborative project to remember and memorialize the lives lost. The chapter offers a community-centered approach that prioritizes experience-based epistemologies and suggests new ways to engage in knowledge production. So take it away, Valandra.
Okay, thank you. Let me minimize this so I can see my notes. So good afternoon, everyone. I am thankful to be here. I want to thank Elaine and Joseph for this invitation to present our chapter. And as they said, I'm here representing myself and also my co-authors, Roanne Elliott and Dr. LaShonda Fields. And just to provide you with some contextual framing before I begin reading, I am going to read from the book 3 to 4 minutes, talking about the case, practice, and also the connections. So I would like to also, though, let you know that our chapter is specifically focused on the racial terror and violence of the white power structure of Southern whites in Arkansas enacted against Black individuals, families, and communities historically, and its current impact. All right, I'm gonna see if I can get my slides to change here. Okay. So the Washington County Community Remembrance Project, otherwise referred to as the Coalition, it was established in 2018 after Roanne, our project's coordinator, and I attended the grand opening of the Equal Justice Initiative National Monument for Peace and Justice, and the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. The coalition worked in partnership with EJI to erect a historical marker to memorialize 3 enslaved Black men, Anthony, Aaron, and Randall, who were victims of racial terror lynchings in Washington County, Arkansas in 1856. The marker was installed and dedicated on May 15, 2021 in Oaks Cemetery, the first planned Black cemetery in Fayetteville, Arkansas. The coalition is a multi-generational, multiracial group of 12 to 15 longtime Washington County residents and relative newcomers who are community members, historians, university professors, and graduate students. All participants work in their churches and other community organizations and are dedicated to engaging in anti-racist discussions and actions to disrupt the culture of misinformation, silence, and complacency about the history of racial terror in our area. Working across racial identities, we were a group of 50% Black and 50% white. We were able to keep our racial conversations open and authentically complex. As we worked on the memorial marker, our intentions extended to how coalition members interfaced with various publics during presentations and the memorial marker's promotion, installation, and dedication. Various coalition members conducted presentations about the project to a cross-section of audiences at various venues, including churches, public libraries, a museum, and the university community. Following the guidance of EJI's Community Remembrance Partnership Initiative, the coalition envisioned 4 essential components for the project. A, creating an anti-racist dialogic process as part of the project. B, installing the memorial marker. C, holding a racial justice essay contest for public high school students. And D, hosting community events to unveil and dedicate the marker. The coalition practices were inspired by EJI's Community Remembrance Project guidelines, learning collectively, building partnerships, and garnering support for the Memorial Marker Project. These guidelines emphasize the importance of unearthing local histories of racial injustice and creating space for honest conversation to illuminate how the past connects to the community's current racial inequities. And I will share how we put these guidelines into practice throughout the project. The project's charged racial context prompted Roanne to encourage the group in the overwhelmingly white community to think of the project as a critical learning experience about race and racism and individual and collective relationships to these realities. In other words, the project was more than just a set of tasks to be completed. It was designed to pay attention to differences in perspective, provide for and hear feedback thoughtfully, express curiosity, check assumptions, and stay open to addressing sensitivities and fragility regarding discussions of race, racism, and white supremacy. Coalition members agreed to approach the project as a learning process to strengthen and build communication skills and practices that advance anti-racism work. This involved talking openly about our individual assumptions, beliefs, values, and backgrounds to understand the forces that shape our perspectives and how we showed up to anti-racist work. For example, in the discussion regarding the placement of the marker, we raised the question of whether the purpose of the marker was to teach white people about racial terror or to honor Black people. This agreement is aligned with the group's intention to make a difference in the community beyond the Memorial Marker Project by increasing individual capacity to engage in critical conversations about racism and white supremacy within and across racial lines. Based on our group discussions, Roanne drafted a set of intentions that we reviewed and discussed. The ensuing debate helped the collective to define what it meant to approach the project as learners and allowed the group to commit to the intentions, which included the following. Take the time this learning requires and avoid rushing through or glossing over racial questions or issues. Proceed through difficult conversations, honoring our love for our ancestors, the real stories of their lives, our own lives, and our shared commitment to truth. Show empathy for ourselves and others as learners. Communicate about racial and cultural issues directly. Take the risk to express ourselves honestly, ask questions, and ask for, provide, and seriously consider feedback. Respond to respectful and sincere expressions of emotion and discomfort as assets in the learning process rather than as threats to the project or personal safety. Take individual and collective responsibility in this learning process and hold each other accountable as co-learners. And be explicit and direct in our discussions about race and racism, how our different relationships to these realities affect how we view the purpose of our work, how we work together to develop the project and the desired outcomes for our community. And one of the ways the coalition actualized the group intentions was in drafting the marker text. Sharply divergent perspectives of the events leading to the lynching existed among the coalition members. The intentions helped guide the dialogue within the small group tasked with creating the text. And the group members practiced listening, challenged discrepancies between the oral and written histories, sought feedback, and held each other accountable. We took the time necessary for a thorough review process involving the writing committee, the larger coalition, and EJI. The coalition's first and primary partnership was with EJI through its Community Remembrance Project initiative. And as the project progressed, we took steps to seek and build partnerships within the local community. Roanne initiated a process that involved the following: identify project outcomes and aligned partnership criteria, determine organizations that can facilitate the attainment of each outcome, utilize group members' networks and brainstorm to identify potential partners, and select partners. Using these steps, the coalition built a diverse network of local partners representing racially diverse organizations from multiple community sectors, including churches, libraries, public schools, videographers, the mayor's office, the Chamber of Commerce, a museum, food vendors, and state funders. Our local partners allowed us to interface with various publics and offered the group another opportunity to garner community support. The community is predominantly white, which required the group to have frank discussions about culturally relevant networking to engage Black community members. So coalition members with connections to Black individuals, Black churches, and other organizations made direct personal contacts to discuss the project and request Black community members' participation. For example, we invited Black business owners, known Black leaders, and members of Black fraternities and sororities to collaborate with us, hosting a community meeting to share information and to get their input about the project. In communications with schools, the coalition focused on schools serving more significant numbers of Black students for involvement in the racial justice essay contest. There were also several practical ways that the Memorial Marker Project engaged in anti-racist work in collaboration with the University of Arkansas. A doctoral student in the English department served on the coalition and examined public rhetoric, pedagogy, and access, and counter stories about monuments and memorials of the Daughters of the Confederacy and our coalition's Memorial Marker Project for her dissertation. A journalism student created and disseminated a documentary entitled Once Forgotten on the Memorial Marker Project for a master's thesis. The documentary contrasted the white and Black versions of the story, the events leading to the lynchings, and the legacy of racial violence in America. The history department invited the coalition to provide a community panel on race and the process of confronting the legacy of racial terror lynching in Washington County at its centennial celebration of the Phi Alpha Theta Super Regional Virtual Conference. And the marker installation, dedication, and award ceremony was funded in part by the Humanities Center at the University of Arkansas. And then finally, Recognizing the work of the coalition, the Humanities Center nominated me for the Whiting Foundation Public Engagement Seed Grant, which was awarded in 2022 to conduct oral history interviews with long-term Black residents and document, digitize, and disseminate histories of Black life in the 2 regions in Arkansas that have EJI memorial markers honoring victims of racial terror lynching. The other marker was installed at Haven of Rest Cemetery in June of 2021 in Pulaski County by the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement in memory of John Carter, who was lynched by a white mob in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1927. The coalition was initiated as and remains a community-based project. It offers a grassroots community-based approach to knowledge production consistent with the lived experiences of its community members, and it challenges normative epistemologies found in higher education. This approach to knowledge production is consistent with Black feminist thought and critical race theory. These are theories that recognize the centrality of lived experience as legitimate knowledge. Knowledge production grounded through the individual and collective experiences of Black communities challenge normative epistemologies that, in terms of what constitutes evidence or empirical knowledge or scientific evidence, and the criteria for assessing truth. Experience-based knowledge production assumes that those who have lived experiences with the phenomenon, such as white supremacy and racial terror, are the best informants, experts, and intermediaries to share their lives through the individual and collective storytelling, oral histories, and intergenerational transmission based on the meaning they make of their lives. They decide how, when, and to whom their stories are told. Okay, I'll stop sharing. And should I field any questions now, or how would you like to?
Valandra, thank you so much for that. It's one thing when we read a chapter, but it's something else when you hear it being shared, right, from the authors themselves, and your methodology as a storyteller and oral historian it really speaks to the power of the telling and the retelling, because I've listened to it and I've heard it differently when I hear you share it, and so I want to thank you for that. I have a couple of things that just popped out at me today. Again, the EJI project guidelines are stellar, and the importance of laying that type of foundation in the work that we're doing. And sometimes we're as faculty members or academics, we're so transactional or so quick to try to get the project done within certain time frames that we skip over some of these really important foundational pieces of the work. You also talked about the importance of how we show up. Really important to think about who we are in this work ourselves, know enough about ourselves so that that we're paying attention to how we're carrying ourselves and how we're showing up, and being brave enough to own it when we're not showing up as our best self, right? And the graciousness about the generosity around increasing individuals' capacities to engaging in difficult work, difficult conversations. So just recognizing that we are all coming at this work from different spaces and places and experiences, and being gracious enough to open up a space that we're saying we want to get into this together, wherever we're coming from, and help us realize our individual and collective fullest potential in this work. And so that sense of like generosity and capacity building for the greater collective good was another takeaway from me in your telling and retelling today. And the oral history and the storytelling piece, I'm going to connect to the question as well, because when we ask, I'm going to ask a question, Joseph's going to ask a question, and then we hope we'll get some more from folks who are in the Zoom. You know, what are the lessons or the key practices that you would convey to particularly academics who are in the room, or scholar practitioners embarking on this work? And I'm really curious about your identity as an oral historian, if there's anything that you want to say about that. But Valandra, much gratitude for the authoring with your colleagues, the work you did in the community, and for doing this today. Thanks so much.
Yes, you're welcome. The first thought that comes to my mind is know thyself. And that is I think it's a work in progress. One of the things that I really appreciated, most of my research has been pretty community based. And I know that, being a member of a marginalized community myself, I've had a sensitivity in terms of how, we engage partners or talk to partners. But even with that, I would say that it was really in working with and collaborating in this process, particularly with Roanne. Roanne brings a level of patience and openness and curiosity that I did not have. And I'm still working on that. And she brought that to the work that we were doing. And it really, opened up the process for us to come in, not for me as a professor and an academic, not to come in with my credentials on my back or my titles. It was really, sitting back and listening and paying attention and letting ourselves really be guided by the community itself, even if, and there were times when, in addition, when I say know thyself, I know that I can be a very, structured, linear kind of person. And I just had to sit back and go, okay, now it's time to be quiet. Now it's time. It's like, even if I think, no, that's not the right road, just sit back and listen and pay attention. And I think, so I would say, know thyself. And really, that's what principle 2 is about. Turning that mirror on yourself and looking at, your biases and and one of the discussions we had was about, there was the book about, I'm blanking on the author's name, but she talked about white fragility.
Oh, yeah.
But we talked about one of the questions that we raised, and again, it came from a comment that Roanne made was, well, what does Black fragility look like in a space like this? So it just opened the door again, that curiosity, and it's like a willingness to kind of go there and learn, not come in as an expert, but as a learner and a co-learner.
Thank you so much, Valandra. Joseph?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that Elaine said in response to your presentation, Valandra. In fact, so as editors of this section, of course, we read your proposal and then the chapter, of course, and we've had really, I thought, a really amazing back and forth on the chapter. But there's so much about what you're doing in this work that is like truly intersectional. Like when we talk about intersectional, sometimes that could also get a little bit calcified around an academic understanding of it. But I do think that there's so much in terms of your community partnerships, the construction of relationships that that are interpersonal. I love that you could take this principle that we have, which is about self-reflection, and really make that in the most personal and deepest impactful way possible. And I think that it really does demonstrate something that we can do in academia, but it requires an effort for us to kind of escape certain
Mhm.
gravities and certain pulls that we have within academia.
Yes.
So I just I
Mhm.
so much appreciate
Mhm.
that. So every time reading anything, you get something up, but your presence and the photographs and stuff also bring something really amazing to it as well. So
Mhm.
my question is really, that the other thing that's really interesting about doing this work and putting together this book and just really being involved in community engagement work and really also looking at it through an anti-racist lens is the kind of interdisciplinarity of it. My
Mhm.
discipline is architecture, and you're an oral historian, and so and each of us have different pathways to think about both doing our community engagement work, but also think about how anti-racism plays a role in that. And I wanted, so my question is a little bit about what are the implications for this work within your discipline? So folks who are
Mhm.
doing the work, what do they make of, both your
Mhm.
community
Sure.
engagement work and doing it within this framework of anti-racism?
Mhm. That's a really wonderful question, and I thought about it from the standpoint and thinking about it. African and African American studies is an interdisciplinary program. It's an interdisciplinary study. A lot of people think it's just about history, but it is not. And I'm also a professional social worker. So we when in social work too, we have a code of ethics and we have mission statements and we have a lot of guidelines that are used to help us in trying to address oppression. But we've also failed at it in many ways and have perpetuated white supremacy and colonialism. And so I think that this anti-racist just using the language of anti-racist community engagement really can open up dialogue and a way of really, critiquing, what we are doing in ways and fine tuning what we can do in ways as an interdisciplinary profession, um, in ways that we had not previously. If we are willing to really, when we talk about community engagement, let the community lead. And that's where I think there is a big challenge, because what gets reinforced in higher education, what gets reinforced in the university setting and institutions you are the expert. You
Mhm.
are the one who needs to go and tell people what they need to do, how they need to do it, what theories they should follow, blah, 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 what
Mhm.
methodologies. It is a, it is as, it, it's a, it's a big barrier. If you just put it like that, it is a huge barrier.
Mm.
I think there is hope when you think about this work in a community engaged way and also an interdisciplinary way,
Right.
so that we're not in these silos thinking that this one way is the best way, or the way we do it in our field versus this field versus this field.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Valandra. Valandra, is
Mhm.
there anything that has come up from the conversation that the three of us have been having that you want to add or lift up?
Well, yeah, one of the things, I was a couple of weeks ago, I was presenting at an oral history conference, and a lot of oral historians do community-based work, community engaged research, community engaged projects, and in one of the presentations, there was almost an apologetic way in which they talked about the work that they do in terms of enhancing and supporting communities as opposed to publishing.
Mm.
And I thought about this book and I thought, what about both and? Because having a book like this as a tool, as a guide, is very beneficial to other practitioners but it does help. It does also help when you are, at least at my university, it is viewed as a scholarly product that
Mhm.
supports your tenure and promotion, your annual evaluation. So I don't think that it's something to be ashamed of, that you are, working in the community and are publishing. And I think one of the ways in which I feel like we model that in our chapter is we have community-based authors. Roanne, our
Yes.
our coordinator of our project, she's not a faculty member at the University of Arkansas.
Mhm.
And so it's a wonderful way of modeling how you can really co-collaborate.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Joseph, I'm going to hand it over to you now in a moment for the conclusion. But Roanne, the question that is in the Q&A is about, exactly this point, like the utility of the book, right? And the usefulness of it. And the question is asking about, how to use it on our campuses to advance the work. I want to share, and when Joseph's talking, I'll try to get the link. We do have a digital companion, or maybe Nicole, if you're still there, you could pop the link to the digital companion, where a lot of the tools that were mentioned in the book are available on the Campus Compact and the New England Equity and Engagement Consortium websites, right? So you could use it, yes, as a book club, but there are other ways to use this. Valandra, what are your thoughts on how others could use the book to advance the work on their own campuses?
You can use the book as a textbook in the classroom. When I was teaching particularly micro practice courses, policy courses in social work, this would have been a great text, to use in the classroom. I think that there are also student organizations on campus, organizations that we call them RSOs. I can't even remember what that stands for now, but they are
Registered student
student
organizations.
Oh,
What did you
what?
say?
Registered student organizations. That's what we call
Yes,
them.
yes. RSOs could use this textbook. They
Yeah.
could use this book in RSOs, the multicultural centers on campus. Those kinds of programs could use this book and make it available. We also do a one book. We do a one book where we bring in an author of a book. The whole campus reads the books.
Yes.
This could be used in that way.
Right.
We have an AAST. We have a communiversity initiatives in which you engage. Again, it's about, because we are a public institution, and we have a mandate, mission, to really be to support engagement in communities. So I mean, there are many ways that we could this book could be used.
Right.
Should I respond to the question in the, I don't know if it's in the Q&A, or how are we doing that?
There is one which, I mean, in some ways you kind of touch on a little bit. Maybe the one that's about students. Is that the one you're looking at?
Yes,
Yeah, but
that's what I can see.
because you mentioned student groups already, and I think that, but I think it's an interesting question. What advice or experience do you have for building capacity among students who want to hold their educational institutions accountable for the lack of commitment to racist work, especially in PWIs?
At PWIs, yes.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I have definitely some thoughts about it. and the first thought that I want to say is that we construct students in many different ways in institutions, and then there's also the reality of the students' lived experience. Students have power, and students also don't have power in institutions, and being mindful of that. Because the first thought that, at my institution, there in the School of Social Work, and also in African and African American Studies, we do invite students to participate on committees, You know, like we have an inclusive and excellence committee, and we met today, and we have 2 student representatives on that committee. That's one way in which students can get engaged and build capacity. However, it's also very challenging for a student to be on a committee and not have their voice heard. If faculty members or senior faculty members or administrators are dominating conversations, are not welcoming, or, you know, think of the students as an afterthought, you know, why would they participate on a committee? You know, so that's one of the ways in which students can get involved. And then the other thing that again, through those student organizations, one of the other things, our students on our campus, particularly the Black students, at one time, they had a Twitter campaign. They did a Twitter campaign to talk about the ways in which they were experiencing this white institution, you know, and the racism they were experiencing in the classroom, in organizations, I mean, across the board. And I collaborated with some of those students, and we co-published an article about their experiences. You know, you can encourage students to write. Students can write in academic journals. You know, they can write manuscripts. They can, you know, they can find agency and build capacity in that way, collaborating in writing about their experiences and publishing them. Those are just a few examples.
Those are great examples. And, you know, in the book itself, we have, you know, many of the chapters are written by students, some, you know, undergrads like Jess, who's currently a graduate student who was in co-wrote her chapters, but we also have undergraduate students who have contributed to the book as well. So I do think that's a really great way. Well, we are at time, or we have just about 2 minutes left, and so Valandra, any concluding thought or word you want to leave folks with as we say goodbye?
Yes, show up. You know, this is work worth doing. Let me put it like that. Yeah.
That is just such an awesome and spectacular way to end this particular session, and with that particular lesson, because not only, you know, do you say it, but you also demonstrate how to like walk the talk, right? So how do you do it? In that presentation of yours was exactly that. So we really encourage all of you to, you know, engage with the book in the chat. We just put the link that takes you to the digital companion, which is a great way, you know, respond to that question about how to do a kind of you know, use the book and as discussion points. So definitely do that. Buy the book if you get a chance. It has, you know, so many. The wonderful thing about working on this book is not only the editorial team, but the amazing authors. And Valandra is just one of, you know, there's 22 chapters and I believe 63 authors in the book. So we really wanted to make sure that there was a diverse voices, and that is really what is so exciting about the book, is these amazing authors that speak through those pages. So I want to thank everyone for being here today. And we have our next presentation in this series is going to be on December 8th from 1 to 2:30. It's a workshop. So hopefully you'll be able to do that. You can find the information on the Campus Compact and register for it. And the digital companion and the book, purchase the book link is in the chat. Take care. Thank you so much. Thank you, Valandra. Thank you, Jessica.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valandra.
All right. Take care.